Once on the verge of death, the girl was reborn with a minor heroine of a fantastic novel. In fact, the plot was known in advance, but still frightened where her fate was sharpened. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw a girl with freckles on her face, carrot hair, as well as gloomy turquoise eyes. She realized that all her life was really difficult and painful, and therefore decided that it was necessary to start everything from the beginning. The main character only reborn and got into a novel that once read before her death. But the story began that way. Arya, which had only incredible beauty, once recognized herself as a saint and went to the capital where she met many different people and rescued them. It was there that she met the prince. But the position of the prince was really very fragile. He was forced to hide the curse with what he constantly fought. But all this was until he met Arya. Thanks to the holy woman, the curse began to become much weaker, and Sylvester gradually began to overcome all his difficulties. The girl realized that by that moment the whole story was a regular novel, but then there was a familiar turn of events. The second character appeared in the novel, Duke of North Benjamin Felton. He was considered a kind person with blonde hair and a soft face. He still had green eyes, which was not related to the image of the Duke of the North. But the most strange was that he was married, though that marriage and had a political agreement. Gradually, she began to realize that everything was in a completely different body. There was less and less in her small and more Grace became. Due to her depression, she just closed in the room, then all her maids took care of her and she felt guilty that they were so shaking at her. All that began to happen to her, the girl considered it very strange, but she could not change anything. And when the maids heard that she decided to take a little stroll, they were very happy and immediately rushed to cook her favorite outfit from which he had to get up. But before her death, the girl was attracted to her bed, so she considered the body to which she got a little not like that, but that she could no longer be bad. Looking at herself in the mirror, she believed that everything was not so bad, so she did not understand the reason for the true heroine. Grace felt deep hatred. It was because of this that in her head there were different thoughts and they had to deal with them. Still, having decided the adopted bath, it seemed that Grace also did not like to show her body and therefore she was constantly covered. The maids constantly tried to make her compliments and believed that after the hostess had taken the bath and strolled, she looked much better. Although everyone was believed that she was approached by any outfit, but she was just indifferent. All things seemed to her just the same. Now she decided not to hide, because her heroine could also rarely leave her room. Therefore, the whole servant had a response when they saw it. As soon as she found herself in the garden, she just looked at what she saw around. Already in the living, it looked much more beautiful than from the window. One of the maids emphasized that the owner thought through everything so that the garden was visible from the window of her room. All that beauty was really created for her. In fact, she did not believe everything at all, as she knew well what the real position of the former hostess of the body in which she was located. Suddenly she heard the sound of other people's steps, and when she turned, she saw the shining of the hair and the eyes of fresh greens. It was an elegant, sophisticated man, Benjamin Felton, who was glad to see it there. He immediately reported that he was very worried about her, though she did not believe him at all. Although his wife was in front of him, who did not appear in the novel directly, it was Grace Felton. Grace was a girl who was chosen to suppress the power of the Duke of Felton. It was in this body that the main character came after her rebirth. She was well aware that in all other circumstances, Grace could not exactly enter the Duke's family. But still it happened in the same way that she married Benjamin, meeting with him only 3 times. Immediately after that, she stopped appearing in secular circles. In fact, she wanted to be a little lonely, but he was constantly around and did not give her that opportunity. Although he did a lot for their relationship, it could not be considered a real couple. She had not a better relationship with her husband, but attitude with other people also did not bring much pleasure. But she was not interested in it. The main reason for the bother was that in the second half of the novel, Grace had to die of an unknown illness or at her husband. Therefore, every time he tried to touch it, she just bounced the other way. He tried to pay attention to her. When he noticed that his wife became cool, he just wanted to spend it in her room. He was clear to him that Grace was not comfortable to be on the street after such a long stay in his room. At such moments, she could not understand why the man was so good, because she considered herself just a minor hero who had only a couple of lines in this novel. But it is after his wife will soon die, the prince will start to go crazy a little, and then it will completely move away from the image of a reliable and good man, and then become the main thief of history. He will want to steal the main character and will even try to kill her, but after failing with the prince, Tom will die in the areas. His love for Arya was very strong, so he wanted to destroy his legitimate wife to marry a woman who loved. Even before the rebirth, when she read the novel, she knew that Benjamin was her favorite hero. There were times when he was very good, natured, but in fact he didn't love his wife at all. Then it seemed to her that she was stupid, so she could not be a loved woman. But she did not understand what her heart was so stabbed. She was in her room soon, but she really wanted to take a walk, but she could not answer him so that he would not follow her constantly. She had a normal attitude to her husband, and she did not even want to offend him, risking injuring his feelings. At that time, she was suddenly aware that it was necessary to remember something from the memory of her heroine, because in the foggy memories there were only a few important details. The woman remembered that the girl Grace in whose body she got were not very close to live together. The Duke lived in the main estate, and she in another small house. All her thoughts were interrupted by a maid, who tried to do everything to make the woman comfortable, because the room was very cold and she wanted to light a fireplace. But she was thinking about the Duke all the time, and therefore did not even pay attention to the proposals of her maid. Therefore, to be left alone, she ordered to cover the table and do her business. Suddenly, she became very scary at that moment. She heard some strange sounds and decided that he was still in her room. It seemed to her that she had heard the laughter of his soul, but she was a maid who brought dinner. The nanny was pleased to care for the mistress, so she was not at all to be called at any time. The dinner was delicious. Everything was melting just in her mouth. It seemed to her that the cook had tried to glory. Suddenly, she noticed a carriage from the main estate in which a man sat. She was very interested to find out where the Duke could go. At that moment, it even seemed that the maid was put near her in order to follow and not to serve her. Then when she raised her voice, she wanted to know all the answers to her questions, and especially where the Duke went. The nanny immediately confessed that His Majesty was going to service on the Randall Channel. The woman immediately realized that it was his beloved. Then the maid added that the whole temple had to go there, as it would be a cleaning ceremony. As soon as she saw her reflection, she realized that she couldn't love a woman who looked like that. Unlike Arya, she had wavy braids and exquisite clothes looked like a necklace she wore that day. The maid was a little worried because she realized that the hostess began to feel a little important. But she did not want someone to worry about her, so she tried not to give a sight that something was wrong with her. Arya was always very good. She had white hair, golden eyes that were constantly shining, and had exquisite skin. Grace knew that Arya was completely opposite to her. It seemed to her that the Duke was simply passionate about Arya and no one had the strength at all. Then the girl gave up even the food and decided to become a little more flat, but she was not sure that it would become even cute. But since she was able to degenerate and chose this body, she was very grateful that it was possible to move at least. During the walk, she realized that her body was very weak. She could not even run normally. But it was in this life that everything was completely different, so she decided to adhere to a healthy lifestyle as well as to increase endurance and lose weight. And she very much wanted to come up with her husband for her own purposes. She really wanted to get rid of this story and live alone. Judging by the Duke rushed to the Arya, their attitude still reached out of the dead point. It seemed to her that the Duke with Arya had a date, and so she decided that she would definitely not interfere with their happiness. Grace seemed if she began her own life, the Duke would not see the obstacle in her and may not try to kill her then. In fact, she was not sure that much could have changed, but wanted to make a lot of effort. The maid understood that something was wrong with her, but could not understand what exactly, and then heard that the hostess was tuned on a diet and exercise. The basis of the diet was a balanced nutrition and the right lifestyle, as well as special exercises and all. But she realized that her body was not healthy at the time to do it all. She had the feeling that it had 100% fat. Then she asked the maid to find a clothing that could completely fit into the body. Sally knew that from the very beginning, Grace was against the demonstration of her figure, so she could not but be surprised to be a sudden change in the behavior of her mistress. The girl stressed that if there was no such clothes, then it was possible to sew several of her things, but for that it was necessary to call a tailor. She wanted the employee to be exactly who she knew, because she could not meet new people in such a body. There were times that she had rejected everything in the background and was grateful only for moving freely in this body, not lying simply. After she got into this body, she took a long time to realize everything that happened to her. At some moments, she felt just helpless, as she spent several days not getting out of bed. But the sweat realized that it was necessary to gain strength and to start doing something, because everything Baldo was not so bad. Even more time it took her to realize that she was in the imaginary world, navigating that there was something to find. The girl really wanted to find all the diaries of her heroine to whose body she got, because she realized that everyone who was in the estate would soon realize that she was not a real Grace. She decided to see all the rings under her, but there was no result. The whole situation was very sought and also raised her right, but she still decided to do everything that was in her power. Suddenly, she found a small wedding ring, but she did not even have a precious stone at all. After she held the wedding ring in her hands, she began to feel strange, and all the memories of that moment were no longer returning. Suddenly, someone knocked on her room, and then she realized that she was a saliva. The woman began to apologize, but reported that she brought all the necessary dietary supplements to promote health, which Grace has completely forgotten. She also reported that the owner also knew that the wife had not accepted anything, and therefore worried about her. At that time, the girl even seemed that in those pills there could be something if the man was worried about it. The maid showed that she was a little frightened and could not tell everything because she may not know anything or just did not want to talk about it. She did not know whether it could really believe all this, but she was also worried that it was because of those pills that she could also kill her. Since she knew that the real Grace died of some unknown disease, these pills seemed even more suspicious. But she realized that it was not possible to find out when all attempts began to attempt her life. So she decided to go to the kitchen, but was very afraid to break down as the food had a very pleasant smell. Then she decided to ask that from that moment she would start cooking something easy. The salad was really delicious, but it was not enough for her. It seemed to her that she was not hungry, but felt something lacking. The maid tried to somehow reassure her mistress and reported that she had even a good complexion that day. Then she decided that when you drink a lot of water, it really helped, although she did not have a lot of acquaintances from whom she could hear it. While she was waiting for her tailor, she still decided to drink tea but refused a cookie, which could lead to weight gain. However, she did not want her to be not hospitable among the nobles and so considered thick, lazy. If you could still rumors that she could not accept a tailor, then it will be a chess at all. She immediately ordered everything to be prepared for his arrival, and while she would drink water. It was not necessary to wait for a long time, and the tailor was already on the doorstep with the catalogue so that they could decide together what she wanted. Looking at the fact that the Duchess chooses, the tailor immediately reported that she would not work for her. He said that not so long ago, such a dress was ordered by the Countess Corfin, so if the Grace was ordered the same, then it will just be laughing above her. The Salts could not hold back her emotions when she heard that the tailor allowed the Duchess Grace to the Duchess. Grace immediately realized that the tailor tried his best to spin the quarrel with her, and she could do nothing with it, because it was better to argue with a tailor than to hear this voice constantly in his head. When she pointed her finger on all his dresses in the catalogue, she reported that they were just disgusting. The man decided it was a joke because he realized that she was not familiar with such outfits. Having gained patience, the woman asked that he put everything in detail for her in points and explain exactly what she did not know. Kravitz noted that she spent a lot of time in the device and all young designers did not fit under her body at all this year. Lady decided to turn to the fat for her because she wanted to order only comfortable clothes, and the tailor tried to offer only expensive outfits. In fact, it was part of her plan, the publication of gossip with the help of people around him. The gossip was always well diverged between the servants and then spread further. Perhaps by that time everyone already knew about the visit of the tailor to Miss Grace. In fact, she still liked one dress, but he reported that she would definitely not suit her. The maid could not believe that the tailor allowed himself to behave so because he was in the house of the Duke of Felton. She did not expect that everything would go in this way and decided to even pose another tailor, as she needed only 2 things. He could not believe that he could do so because he still made a lot of efforts to sew things in her figure. But all this did not really bother her because her husband was still ready to pay for all the work of the tailor. When she noticed that there was nothing to say to her husband, she immediately decided to leave his company. But when she closed the door, she began to doubt her actions and because she behaved very cruelly with him. When she met her husband, she was very angry because she had a lot of sweets in front of which she could gain weight again. But because of courtesy, she tried to be grateful. He reported that he had bought a bunch of desserts that were popular. The coffee they drank was also quite popular, but if the lady was not liked, he was ready to bring something else for her. Soon he was pleased to hear that she really liked everything, namely coffee and sweets. But if she had not read the whole story from the beginning, she could not understand everything correctly. She realized that the Duke's smile said, however, that she did not like the woman. And so when he heard that she refrained from sweets, he was a little surprised. But soon she decided to admit that it was all because she tried to lose weight a little. And when she began to taste coffee, it seemed that the worst never had to try. And with overweight, she also did not love herself with her overweight. Then the Duke began to be interested in the tailor, which he recommended for her. He also informed that all the property was confiscated and sent abroad himself. The Duke also promised that he caught that not one brazen in shadows did not throw her reputation. He remembered that his wife wanted all the thieves to be ordered. As soon as she paid attention to his smile, she immediately realized that she was like the rays of the sun, as if he had an angel. When she met a new tailor, he was very friendly, but tried not to look at her. His face seemed very pale. It seemed to her that her husband's tailors were surprisingly very interesting and in fact strange, but at that time the dukes were rarely caught up with tailors for their duchesses. Typically, the tailors were called aristocrats, who specifically tried to make world passion during some events. But as expected, something went wrong because the maid stressed that the tailor was still found. The man was found dead at the border. It turned out that he was even worse than everyone could think about him. The woman simply could not believe that she had heard such a terrible news, as well as that her maid was rare because a person who did not even deserve to breathe no longer present in their world. Only then the nanny realized that the lady was not pleased to hear it all, and also hoped that she did not make her feel a little discomfort. Lady decided that it was necessary to go for a walk, but to wear something from the purchased outfits. Dressing in comfortable clothes, she immediately began to feel much more confident and comfortable. But her body was still very difficult, but still it was a little better to breathe than before. When she met the Duke, he was endlessly glad that for the second day they had the opportunity to meet. They immediately began to discuss that the last days the weather was simply incredible and wanted to enjoy the sun all the time. But the Duke was not tired of emphasizing every time all their meetings were just accidental and tried to say that he even thought of planting a little new seedlings in the garden. And when it came to peaches, she seemed to show that she was indifferent to them, but tried to play the Duke. And so she even agreed to taste the peach tart, but it was necessary to stay as it was on the diet. Then the man decided to ask if she had some favorite flowers. She was not really very dealt with, so she could not remember any name, as she was not going to become a gardener. When the maid paid the attention of them, she was surprised that there was a large distance between them and everyone was actually engaged in their own. Every day they had a better relationship with Fat. The maid even noticed that her mistress had started to lose weight a little. At a moment, she realized that the correction of nutrition was still a lot of help. Therefore, it was a couple more pounds and then you could put for divorce. She tried not to miss walks every day but still hated Benjamin. Going to the garden, she hoped that he still did not go out this time for a walk, and their past meetings could even be a coincidence. Until she passed in the lawn, she immediately saw that all the flowers were with the cards on which their name was written. The maid immediately told that it was the owner who ordered the gardener to do it all. But she couldn't understand why that is. Perhaps because she simply did not know the name of the flowers. It could not be called ordinary kindness. Immediately, she caught herself thinking that she began to think of some strange things that the girl was not needed at all. While she was walking, she did not meet the Duke and realized that she was a little sad, as she had already got used to their walks. It is already past enough time, and the maid paid attention that her hostess seemed very thin at first glance. The woman immediately decided that her mistress had said something stupid, and she decided that something could happen when she went to the office. Then she remembered that in the original story, and it was said that Grace usually hid in the office on any occasion. In this, they were both similar that they were spent most of the books. Recently, the girl began to give preference to walks, and staying in the room suggested just sadness on her. At some times, it seemed to her that she did not remember anything better, but in her memory remained cloudy knowledge of this world and something about Grace. But she decided not to focus on all the little things and decide to see a small office. When she went there, she did not expect that the cabinet would not be so small. The windows were clean and ordered, and everything was in their places. Suddenly, a maid came to her who brought for her floral tea, which was very popular at the time. Deciding to put the tea for a little after later, she made it possible to search for a diary that she was very needed. Looking around, everything around her still could not find exactly what was needed. She only saw a mechanism in front of her. Suddenly, she still found a diary that she was looking for, but did not understand why he had to hide him so carefully. There were records that Grace led before the wedding. All this was like a notepad, but it was pleased. From those records, it was clear that Grace wanted to have a baby, but the floor. It did not succeed in various reasons. There was even a situation when she told her husband, but he touched her with his dislike. He really didn't want to have children from her. The more the memories of Grace about Benjamin, the more something in his kindness was felt. At that moment, she could not contain her emotions from relocation to her body. All the fact that the Duke did not love Grace at all pushed her simply to despair. Both maids saw that the hostess was very fed and tried to cheer her up with the news of the Derna festival, as well as that there would be a masquerade with mantles and masks. Since she looked very bad, the nanny wanted to offer her to eat something delicious to cheer up a little. She was very worried because Grace has not eaten anything lately. Both the maid and the Duke were very kind to the girl that she even had the thoughts that she could die of such kindness. Suddenly, she noticed that the Sali began to cry from the fact that she did not understand what could help her mistress. Grace reported that the maid was really very useful for her, but at that moment she was very tired morally, so they plunged into her thoughts that she had noticed nothing around. The nanny reported that he had prepared a delicious soup that day, so at any time she could visit it. But yet she got out of bed, took a bath, tasted a delicious soup. Then she started reading and found something very interesting for herself, but then decided that it was possible to start a diary. Looking at the records in the diary, it was clear that the heroine did something, but she did not understand anything at all. When she looked out the window, it was clear that someone began to throw stones at the Duchess' window. Then she saw a smiling Duke who, with her smile, seemed to need some attention. The Duchess decided that there would be nothing older if she still devotes a little time to him. As soon as he noticed that she was not asleep, he was a little surprised. It was he who threw little stones that their knock could be heard. He confessed that he was a little worried lately, as she did not go out for a walk. And now her house was closed, and he could not come to her, but it was precisely because it was she who forbade him to come. It seemed to her that the man was really, really careful, but did not understand why her heroine forbade him to come to her. He explained that he was very pleased to see his wife after a long time, and also said that the festival would soon pass. Therefore, he stressed that if she had a very good state of health and free time, then he suggested to go with him. She was very surprised, because she did not count on. At the mask festival, everyone could have fun hiding their appearance by the mask. It was difficult to believe that in the original story, the Duke himself asked her to go with him. Since she could not make a decision for a long time, the Duke thought to come directly to her, but as soon as she saw it, she immediately agreed. The Duke was really happy that he received a positive answer. It even noticed everyone around him. He even informed his assistant that his wife was very surprised by the fact that he agreed to go to the festival together, and so he had now had to give her 24 hours. The assistant believed that it was not a good idea, but could not argue with his Duke and simply decided to remain silent. When she went on to bed, she did not believe that all this happened to her, and he was really ready to spend so much time together. In the original story, Grace accurately refused him, and so he went to the festival and began to get around there. It was written in the diary that both girls prepared gifts, but when Arya began to feel superfluous, their attitude began to develop a little different. But this time in the real world, she would go to the festival with him, and then she became interested in whether she would change the course of the story to which she came to. She realized that among all the rumors, she quickly flew and could freely reach the royal family. From the side, it could all look like this, as if in the organized royal family everything was very good. At a moment, she even thought that Benjamin began to like, but then realized that he just wanted to express his devotion to the royal family. Still, it was interesting to end with the fact that he would start going crazy in Arya and then just stolen her. Then she was really an emotional day for her, so her eyes were closed on her own and she decided that she had to rest. The next morning, as soon as she woke up, she began to feel very restful and even wanted to restore all her walks. When she visited her maid, she immediately stressed that everyone in the estate was tuned to prepare the festival. Grace was surprised that only one night could all quickly fly away. The maid immediately brought a mantle that the girl could wear for the festival, but at first glance she seemed a little dense, so she could be hot in it. At that time, she reported that it was this mantle that was sewn from the fur of the magical beast and had the ability to absorb heat. Grace was very happy because she realized that magical animals had many strange properties. This mantle was decorated with a green brooch, but it is this gift that her husband made her lover. In the original story, when the Duke's wife died, he stole Arya and threw her mantle on her shoulders. So she did not understand whether she could really dress the thing, although at first glance she liked it. Grace, according to the maid, realized that this fur was specially obtained for her and not just bought. Then the girl asked the maid to move away from the window for a moment, but she did not understand that the hostess could think. The knights who were exhausted after the campaign were very worried that this place was not visible to their mistress. But she still saw knights who were under her window and could not believe that the fur was obtained simply by accident. The maid tried to reassure her and switched to other topics. So she reported that the festival should have been long and there would be many people. She could not believe that at that time it was not the season of hunting and a search unit was collected, and since the beast could be found only once a year, it was a great fortune. Now she heard exactly what she wanted, but did not know how to be like this. Therefore, I decided not to bother and just put on that mantle and not attach to all this. But for the knights who got this fur for her, she decided to make some gifts. And the maid was convinced that the knights would be very glad when they would see the hostess on a date with the duke and in this mantle. Therefore, in order not to waste time, they went to the hall where you needed to choose an outfit for the festival. Whatever the dress, she does not try, but everything was very big on her. But she didn't have time to embroider something. Dressing the dress that she was most approached, she immediately made it because it was already necessary to go. The duke looked very good. This outfit looked to him that she did not even expect that it could be. The girl was very worried that she was late, but when he took her hand gently, he reported that he had come early, but could no longer wait for her. Grace calmed down and began to feel that her excitement had stopped, but she still knew that in the original story, this mantle that was intended for Arius. They decided not to show themselves together on humans, so the Duke also suggested to call each other somehow. He wanted her to call him a cute or some other name, but it was very unexpected for her. She also very much wanted it to call her a nice name. Subsequently, she confessed that she was the first festival in her life, and in general, she liked to sit at home. There were times when she thought she could be silent, but the Duke tried his best to dispel her. He also stressed that the reason for wearing masks was hidden in the legend, according to which, among those who came to the festival was one demon. Grace did not hear such a legend and believed that it was all the fairy tale that her father came up with as a child for her with her sister. At that time, he was very interested to hear what she had a relationship with her sister, as she told very little about her family. In fact, she did not remember much, but she was accessible to all particles of memories of Grace. After a while, he took her hand, as it was then that it was time to stay close to each other. To support the conversation, he even told that she knew that she had been able to pamper on food, but he wanted to indulge in something delicious that day. Although she couldn't have everything, but when she saw that there was so much everything around you are very difficult. He was glad that she was not mind and therefore offered to go and bring something delicious. Left alone, she had to be very careful, because there were many strangers around, but the most dangerous among all the Duke really looked. Suddenly, she saw little children who sold something on the street, and so she decided to approach them. The kid was selling cute, but it was really not good in appearance. The shape, color, and smell were quite simple, and so Grace was not sure whether it had to be bought. At that moment, she was interested in knowing where the guardian of those children was, and why he forced them to work independently. Suddenly, a girl approached her, and Grace decided that it was a shelter warden, but it turned out to be it all. The children began to hide for the skirt of their ordinary teacher. At first glance, it was possible to think that all the funds raised by the children took away all the teachers. Then they decided that the assignment of children should be a person of high position, namely the director. Grace couldn't decide to make her best at that moment, whether to finish Asylum or buy just all the soap from children or come up with something else. The girl was interested in knowing the name of the teacher, but first decided that it would be more correct to introduce. When they met, Grace suggested helping sell them all soap. And then she immediately introduced the teacher of her husband, who had previously informed that she had bought tools for making soap as well as some sweets for children. The teacher was not against the fact that the man, Grace, joined them, because someone was needed to see the children. They began to consider herbs and flowers that were bought for the manufacture of soap, as there were several types. The teacher was a little shocked that the girl was well dealt with what they started to do. As soon as they finished, the result was seen that it came out quite good, expensive and handmade, and they made the decision to sell the demeanor also not cheap. Although the teacher believed it was too expensive, Grace was convinced that everything had to be sold. Men who were nearby heard a very pleasant aroma, but could not understand where he was. When the guests raised their heads to the mountain and saw that a bunch of soap balls began to fall on them, everyone was delighted that there was just an incredible beauty around. The children were just delighted with the fact that it was a very interesting activity that they had not previously had. The woman could not understand what it was for a man, Grace, and how she was able to understand such things so skillfully. Buyers were simply shocked by such beauty and could not pass through such a good product. Then for the sale of the girls, came up with a legend that if you used the flower soap on the festival, then your desire could come true. Young people were pleasantly impressed and thought it was really romantic. As soon as everyone was heard that after use came the desire, a big queue was argued and everyone wanted to buy goods. After such a productive day, Grace felt that she was really sought. From the very beginning, she did not plan to help with the sale, but the teacher looked very competed. At some point, the girl began to feel not very well. She darkened in her eyes, squeezed in her chest, and began to be nailed. Just a minute ago, everything was very good, but perhaps she did not notice this condition before, because she was very occupation. Suddenly she fell and her mask just flew from her face and saw it a man she touched when she fell. As soon as the stranger paid attention to her, he considered it very thick, if she could not evade and still touched him. Grace realized that he was drunk and the first to fly, but for some reason she could not say it, as her tongue did not obey her. It was at that moment that the man tried to steal her chest and she began to shout for help. The Duke appeared on the way, who was in a good enough mood and did not want someone to ruin him. The husband was right at the right time for his wife and asked her to trust him fully. After all, it was time to go home and was even ready to carry it in her hands. She felt that she had completely glued and could not throw that reconnaissance from her heads, possibly because one could immerse himself in her thoughts on 1-1. She really wanted to go to that shelter again, but she could not dare in any way. Still, she wanted to do something very useful. Therefore, she asked her maid to bring her accounting book and then start to take something. When she opened it, she realized that all the records were in good condition, but it was evident that they very often bought expensive jewelry for 2 years. All this seemed very strange because they were married only 1 year and she tried to be at home all the time. But she immediately took in her hands and decided that it was not necessary to drive herself into even more panic, but it is better to come up with something that could be done for the shelter. She wanted to start the tea business and make everything available more accessible to ordinary people. I wanted to choose the place, but at first it would be good to buy all the land she wanted. While Grace was occupied by important things, her maid warned her. The Duke gave her a small gift for her. In her head there was a constant expression of his face, because she never saw him so angry before. But rejecting all the things a little while, they both went to look at the gift. There were a bunch of different flowers on the street, which were well suited for herbarium, and there were a lot of them. She was actually impressed with the gift. But then it turned out that it was not everything. There were still a bunch of boxes with cookies, but Grace immediately ordered them to be attributed to the shelter. Having viewed all the gifts, she immediately sprinkled in the maid muslin to try to do something. She also wanted to ask one service yet, but in fact, no one was against what she would do it. But she understood that if something happened, Grace would really be very difficult to handle on her own. It seemed to her that everything had to be in order, because there were few people on the streets and really calm. She has long been aware that after divorce, her reputation could change, but there was no time, and the girl decided to concentrate all the attention on the help of the shelter. The teacher only realized that Grace meant when talking about business. It was tea in the bags she made from muslin. Everyone realized that in order to enjoy the tea, it was necessary to use many devices to brew it, and few of the ordinary people could safely enjoy the drink. Then she showed that the tea bag had to be simply filled with hot water. But the teacher did not understand whether they could actually make such an idea because they had neither a store nor ingredients that were really difficult to get. But it was not a problem, and Grace knew that she could solve it all. And what concerned the assistants, she decided to hire mothers of children. The woman was surprised and could not understand how the Duchess knew exactly that children had a mother from the shelter. Everything was really obvious. The children were too clean and well, groomed, as for those who had a guardian and a teacher. The Duchess was immediately confident that the children probably wanted to see them, as everyone wanted to be a loved one. Since everyone was accepted at once, Grace was sure that they really needed money. But in any shelter, the mother was not able to meet her children. But this conversation with the woman was not in vain, because she really wanted to find out about the director of that shelter. She reported that the man escaped as she saw that the shelter would not make the appropriate earnings, so he raised all the money and left that place. Now Grace was satisfied with everyone heard and was convinced that it was still necessary to hire mothers, because the task was big for young children. The woman was glad when she heard that the empty space could be turned into the work area, and free bedrooms would be used to accommodate all workers. It was obvious that it could reduce the cost, and the mother would be able to stay with their children under the type of placement. But soon the Holy Arya will also give a blessing on earth, and the next few years tea leaves from that earth will be of high quality. She knew that there were only 13 children in the shelter, including 7 mothers, but so far only one had accepted her proposal. Grace understood everything, but if not everyone would connect, then her efforts could be much smaller, and if she later served for divorce, then it could be well reflected in her business. There were times when she thought even to find the director of the asylum and give him a good time, but then her husband would know everything about everything. Then she decided that it was necessary to meet him personally and bring a gift, or even wanted to do something with her own hands. Later, she came up with letters and decorated it with pressed flowers, which he gave her. The maid immediately thought about whom the language went and that it could think of her mistress. The question was just on the tongue in Sally, but still she did not dare to say. After all, it was the first time when the maid saw such a mistress joyful and live. All the days of Catherine were just terrible. She worked in the kitchen all day, left it late in the night, and came early in the morning. The woman realized that she could not leave the job, because next month it would be a year, as she got a job there, and now she hoped that it would be possible to buy at least a gift for the baby. Suddenly, she took a gift and a letter. The woman knew from whom it, but she was definitely not ready to join a group for her interests. As soon as she began to read the letter, she immediately realized that there was no business there. But those joyful words that were tears in the eyes were not enough. Such letters are full of warmth and kindness. Everything continued to come, and in the end they convinced all mothers to agree. Everyone was satisfied and could not wait when they returned to the shelter together. It seemed to her that the work did her still happier when everything was going well. She didn't feel so depressed. But all the time the Duke was near the Aria nearby, and in the meantime, Grace was engaged in her business. When she was in the shelter, it seemed to her that the women were very good, and the more time she spent there, the easier it became in her soul. Suddenly the main teacher visited her and reported that it was time to speak to the mothers who were waiting for the Duchess. While they went, they discussed that they had to visit the textile workshop to agree on cooperation, but everything indicated that they would not have to cooperate with them. The Duchess was convinced that large workshops were usually concluded from the store, leaving small benches with unfulfilled opportunities, and also decided to put the first batch of tea in bags for free in several establishments of the capital. Since people were not familiar with such varieties of tea, they could not buy it immediately, so it was necessary to introduce them to it. Grace was convinced that after cleaning the channel, the water had a strange bite, which was why it was the reason to solve this problem. Arya went west to the expedition. But it was confident that nothing wrong would happen if she used this water for her own purposes. Women just couldn't believe that the carriage they saw was completely full of tea. Grace reported that it was not all. As soon as the number of establishments that use tea in bags will be 5, there will be much more things. After talking to her mothers, she wanted to go to the workshop, but did not want to go one at all, and therefore decided that she could have made a company. And yet one of the women raised her hand and agreed. It was Lily's mom. Very soon they were already in the workshop and began to consider the fabric that they needed very much. The woman did not even expect everything to end so quickly, and was also set up that no one would do more resistance. Grace was glad to help them and hoped that their business would go up. Very soon the woman became more interesting, why they chose the sort of a workshop, not a friend, which was much more pleasant in appearance. She was in fact very awkward to talk about it because then everyone would realize that she was very expensive mantle. Most people could not understand that it was sewn from the fur of a magical beast. The owners of the workshops could easily reveal it all, and it happened in the last. Therefore she gave up a little and reported that it was in the last workshop that muslin was making a subtle and good quality, and they needed exactly one. Thinking about the workshop, Grace began to feel pleasure that everything was in place, and it was then that she saw her husband and Arias on the street, which was simply incredible. Grace realized that Arya was much more beautiful than her and was very different. The Duke did not expect that everything could have happened and he would meet his woman in the city center. Grace and Lily quickly tried to leave the place, but the Duke tried to catch up with them. He even suggested helping carrying all those things, as there were many of them, but immediately heard the refusal and dissatisfaction of his wife. He was very surprised when he heard that his wife knew everything about the Arya and even what was considered holy in the Empire. She also emphasized that she had definitely not had to be considered. The Duchess was very surprised when her assistant, who witnessed an unpleasant scene, even asked nothing. Therefore, she began to consider her very tactical. Grace was definitely not a man of their circle, but everything could only be because they were very close during work. While she was among the other girls, she only thought that she wanted to cheer with her husband as soon as possible, but until he had to restrain her emotions. As soon as she found herself on her bed, she did not feel her body precisely because she was very tired. Even nothing wanted to eat or drink. She began to feel that she had changed a lot after reading the diary, and now Grace Felton became, but she still understood that he could not have spent a lot of time business. It was the Duchess who considered Clet a decisive and good person, so it was not necessary to worry exactly, because the biggest fever at that time was only divorce. When she was about to see the Duke, she learned that at that moment he was a little busy, he just rested. It may have been a little fast for her, but she wanted it from the beginning, so it was best to do it if there was a determination. Grace decided that it was still necessary to end the case until she fell into a depressed state, but did not know what to start talking about. However, when she saw it, she dared to speak first, but his smile was just disgusting for her, though it seemed sweet at first glance. She did not want to die from his hands because of his love, which was unilateral and who was not destined to become mutual. Since he still likes only one, and it will not be Grace, namely Arya. She even seemed that she did not even deserve her gaze. But she did not want to accept death as a response to love in one direction. Therefore, without hesitation, she immediately suggested to divorce so as not to delay all this conversation for a long time. His face was changed at a time, because he continued to hear that his wife was convinced that Vint had loved a completely different woman. The tears did not stop rolling out of his eyes, and he was shocked that she still said it, and most importantly, she was convinced. The Duke stood on her knees and did not understand what a mistake he made, and was ready to change everything. He was ready for everything, and on his knees to stand, and if she didn't like his face, she was ready to even wear a mask for life. Grace could not believe that the Duke was so against their divorce and pleaded not to leave him. The Duchess all the time thought that the Duke had only loved the Arya, as his wife had a bunch of shortcomings. He believed that he was largely guilty, but did not notice it at all. His reaction was completely different from what she imagined. He also did not understand why his tears were just rolling from his eyes, but she could not allow the heart to begin to feel pity for him. He soon agreed with her, but reported that he had a problem about it. In the upper nobles, divorce was considered even by the royal court. Each of them influenced the empire in one way or other, so the divorce process was more difficult. She was not ready for reporting that the time for reconciliation was for a year. During this time, they must meet and spend together. You will even need to attend all the steps, but be sure to. But as it turned out, it was not a bad scenario, so the Duke said. And now, after such a conversation, he was really satisfied, because everything turned out exactly as he planned. In the meantime, the prince was very sad because nothing interesting was happening. Suddenly, the assistant of the prince flew to him with the news, namely that he received a report on the consideration of the divorce. And when he heard that the documents were from the Duke of Felton, he even jumped from the place of astonishment. Grace did not believe that they were given 8 months for reconciliation, but it was not clear what she would do all this time. And immediately came the proposal to have dinner with His Majesty. A common dinner was also considered a wedding time. When assessing the Imperial Department of Performance of Duties, it was also taken into account. Now it was clear that the Emperor also took into account even the dinner and the fact that Grace had to stay in the central house. Until there was a lot of time before the dinner, she decided that the fashion was a little walk and then to return. It was before dinner that she was ready to visit the shelter, but she was sure that everything was fine. In all ways, she tried to get out of the house as it was simply not possible for her. As soon as she looked out of the window, she could not believe what was before her eyes. She lifted small stones and immediately a strange feeling that something had to happen. The girl saw a very strange carriage and a young man who came out of her, but later she realized that it was Sylvester Bayman, Emperor. The Duchess did not understand why she had to see it, and when the maid approached her, she immediately began to be interested in where the stones could take. At first glance, it was very strange and because of its color, but then there was light stones in fashion. But she realized that it was not at all in its color, but everything was just that she felt something strange in the middle of her body. Suddenly, the stones just broke in the hand of the hostess and left the burns, so it was necessary to quickly bandage her hand. After the maid happened that everyone was just saying that His Majesty Prince arrived at the estate. Now she believed that it would not be convenient to have dinner with him, because the right hand, which was responsible for table etiquette, was damaged. But still before dinner, she decided to stroll in places that she had not walked for a long time. Everything did not work out as she wanted herself. In the corridor, the Duchess saw 2 men who spoke in high colors. When they noticed that they looked at the lady, they stopped instantly, and the Duke immediately rushed to her. Immediately paying attention to her wounded hand, He began to be interested in what happened. The husband and wife were so busy with each other that they even forgot about the prince, who was also near them. The duke kept the prince's head and wanted to behave accordingly, because though he was a prince, but still it did not give him the right to behave. He asked Millet to wait for him until the prince would bring to his room and then return to her. The duchess was not at all, but reported that it was not necessary to return. The man tried to explain that His Majesty was definitely not a bad person. They knew each other from childhood and grew without all sorts of formalities in communication. Now it was quite clear why the prince's behavior was just as rude at first. Then she decided to meet her clatter, which in the absence of her mistress felt just devastated. Her joy simply had no limits, her hands had durable contracts with individual products, and therefore great success expected them. Therefore they made the decision to visit the plantations with tea, and as the train was riding eternity, and the passage for the passage was very high that she failed to go to them very close. The Duchess was reported that their energy source was not stable at all, though it was in some areas. At that moment the girl happened like a lead. She saw that there was just a disaster and people began to die. The problem happened with the gate. It happened when the western gate failed, which led to a large number of casualties. The gates were connected by different cities. Although many people were saved, their psyche was injured. She understood that if she could prevent a catastrophe, it would hit her business very much, but human life was much higher than everything. The girls decided to use carriages instead of gates, then they would have more resources, but it was necessary to find accompanied. All she came up with a good idea, but the Duchess still thought of how to use her position and prevent that catastrophe. But if everything is successful, then Benjamin no one will blame it, but if something goes wrong, then he is tightened first. If it is so bad, then Arya will become his first comfort. Still, she decided to think about how to stop the disaster, and for this it was necessary to create a situation where they would have to check the gate that day. Due to the intolerance of magic, the Duchess wanted to faint, and it was then that the man will be able to check, or the gates were connected to the west and will be able to find the problem. For her, it was the fastest and right solution that only she could come up with. In those moments, she remembered that she was a little girl and all constantly mocked her and called her a dirty girl. Even her brother could not join her, and when she begged him for help, he also turned away from her. When she woke up, she realized that she was definitely not her dream, but a dream of grace from which everyone laughed as a child. A minute ago, everything was fine, but now she got bad in a moment and she just started falling in everyone in her eyes. When she came to the gate, she began to feel strong, difficult, and whirling, and then simply lost consciousness. Of course, she understood the intolerance of magic, but everything was much worse than imagining. The Duchess hated the place where she heard strange things everywhere, even when she was alone, but during the festival, everything was much better than later. Hearing some sounds again, she decided to open the window and see what happened there. She was very hoped that she was her husband, but when she looked well, she realized that it was just branches of trees rustled, and with them a cool wind blowing. Suddenly she heard the voice of a man who was still standing below and looked at her. He worried about her and wanted to rest well after the loss of consciousness. It seemed to her that she had made a lot of trouble and did not deliberately lost consciousness. If she knew that she would end it, she didn't even try to do so. He then said that all her tea bags tries to buy regularly to send to the north with all the supplies. It is thanks to her people in the north that they can enjoy tea. For her, this was not so difficult to come up with it because everyone is going to this. Benjamin understood all this, but Lady was the first to think of it and put it all into life. In fact, she was very pleased to hear such words of praise from her husband, even if it's just comfort, but she couldn't stop feeling a little happier. He also reported that because he had happened to the office of the bureau and started a gate check, and then asked his wife to be able to negotiate with the holiday. The man also wanted to move their conversation, as it was not very convenient to talk on the street, and she was on top. Then Lady decided that nothing would happen if she still allows him to enter herself. He rejoiced in such an invitation and did not even want to lose 1 minute. As soon as she invited him to herself, she decided that she had completely lost her sense of a bad state of health. Her emotions just came out of control, and now she did not understand how to let her into her. But it was too late, and it was necessary to prepare a little to meet her husband, because she had so much. But he came very quickly that she didn't even have time to do anything. Benjamin stressed that she had to lie in bed instead of standing in front of him. After listening to him, she could not agree, so she did as he asked. Then the man told the story of his childhood and his illness. But there was some miracle, and he was able to overcome a terrible illness. After that, his parents became very pious. They believed that all this was a real miracle sent to them by God. Then he tried to explain what he wanted to make friends in the holiday, thought that they would all be able to go to the temple together. Grace decided to believe him still, and then watch, or in fact he had no hidden motives. The next day they could safely walk together around the city, but he very much insisted that she still did not leave him. Suddenly, she saw that the bow on his clothes had unleashed and decided to repair him a little. He was very pleased that she did it. At that moment, Aklita came to the mistress, who could not even translate the spirit, seemed to be embarrassed. With tears in her eyes, she told that someone had caught her asylum. There was just everything crushed. As soon as they looked well, they decided that everything had to be sorted and thrown away, and something else could be needed. But the Duke wanted to find out whether she had not seen someone suspicious around, because there was no traces of hacking, so it could be someone who they knew. The situation of the man seemed not ordinary, so I decided to learn a little more about the shelter and then draw some conclusions. And then he really wanted the Grace to go outside and breathe a little fresh air, and wanted to check everything else on his own. When they were with the children on the street, they decided to distract them a little and play. Meanwhile, the Duke remained in the management shelter and began to understand what happened. It was very strange that everything around was just crushed, and the gold was in place. Maybe it was not found. When it came to the workshop, it was clear that everything was normal. Since there were dangerous objects, the woman closed it separately. As soon as the Duke thought all this, he decided that he thought only one suspect, but still did not leave him anxiety. While they were playing, one little girl decided to admit that one was not a pleasant man was interested in Malay, but she told nothing. But then, he began to ask questions of different nature, and then even began to threaten, if they would tell someone, he would simply steal them and throw them in the forest. The Duchess immediately began to run to her husband to tell what she learned. Now she knew that there was another problem that had to be dealt with and therefore wanted to leave just a day. The woman reported that they would cope with everyone there and the help of the Duchess is not needed. After all thinking, she decided to move away from the shelter's affairs so that he would not hurt again. Benny was shocked because he knew how she liked to visit there and do those things. He decided that even a former director of that shelter could be involved in this. Since he fled with all the money, and now because of his assistant, he knew about all the cases of the shelter. They came to the conclusion that the director still turned the whole shelter in search of a chest, but still failed to find it. Then she decided that she could go outside in the night to lure the one who carried the newspapers, but the Duke was categorically against such a plan. He knew that she had recently lost consciousness and now it was very risky, but she was still standing on her own. The newspaper did not stop pursuing his goal, especially money. Therefore, he continued to follow his victim, which has recently rarely left home. Suddenly, he noticed her. The woman was dressed in a dark blue mantle and began to move somewhere. Although he felt a little guilty, but realized that the feeling of guilt would definitely not feed him, so he decided to just look at her face and see if it was the one that he was waiting for. But when the person returned, the scoundrel saw not a woman but a military man who set his weapon and wanted to arrest. Roselia successfully completed her combat mission and returned. Everyone was really very satisfied, and the fact that the Duchess's mantle fell to the ground during the mission did not consider it a problem. For her, it was just a mantle, so she did not want the police to take into account. The most important thing was that the task was accomplished and all remained in whole. She also gave Grace things that were taken from the offender, but there were no forbidden objects at all, and the man was an underground chamber of the duchy. The woman was glad to execute the Duchess' order, because it was her debt to her. The Knight of the Wandren was the best among all women of the knights of the empire. As a knight, she gave oath to serve the Duchess, and this task was accepted for honor. Milady all hoped that her request was not a burden for the knight, but in fact became an honor. Grace was fond of a woman knight, because she looked quite calm and confident. The imprisoned sitting in that camera constantly only thought that he would probably die there and would take it very much if he was not tortured. It was at that moment Grace appeared in front of the camera of her enemy. She insisted that he behaves calmly or she would cause guards. When he looked at her, he realized that all the rumors were completely exaggerated, and she was not great, beautiful, but was a simple woman. She said that she read everything that a man searched for her, and made a decision that it was quite a big and painstaking work. She also warned that his case would be transferred to court, but given the whole situation, he should be punished with the most severe punishment than his real crimes. Therefore, she decided to propose an agreement, and then he will not receive in court for life. She had to order that he still closed her mouth and fulfilled all her orders. Now he understood that the rumors that the Duchess was stupid, just dispelled in a moment. It seemed to him that the woman was able to evaluate people and was very smart. After thinking, the man was ready for dialogue and wanted to even listen to everything she could offer him. As soon as she solved all her questions, she wanted to learn a little more from the original story. She wanted to learn about the necklace of the blessing of the sun, which was passed down from generation to generation. Once upon a time, everyone was very embarrassed when the temple stopped showing the necklace. She understood that the task was becoming more and more difficult. Before that, it was still necessary to find asylum director. Grace's husband was also convinced that the asylum director had to be punished strictly, and then to make sure that he and his leg did not step on the shelter. And also all the rights of managing children in asylum to convey it. But in the meantime, Grace heard the strange voices around who tried to convince her that she would not have come from what she conceived. Opening her eyes, Grace could not believe where she was because this room was very strange for her. Noticing the girl in his own eyes, he himself was shocked when her appearance changed a little. She calmly reported that as soon as she went out for a walk, she immediately began to remember the events that took place last night. On that day, it was such a wonderful weather that she did not see how much she thought about her thoughts. Realizing that she wanted to take a long time in the area for a long time, he suggested having a great time together. She did not count on such an offer, so she immediately wanted to find out where she wanted to go. The girl still tried not to trust strangers because she was well aware that because of this in the future, it could have happened to her. After a while, the worker approached them and reported that for the manager, there was a very important task that came to them in the letter. After reading everything about it, he asked the team to start gathering a little, but the man still thought that he didn't need to panic. The girl also decided to help him, so she suggested her help and also decided to quickly collect her things. After they gathered all their things, they immediately sat in a carriage which girl chose to get to their destination. On the way, she was not going to be silent and wanted to talk more with her husband to find out what place they were going on this transport. With a great initiative, the man smiled and began to talk about that place much more information because he was well understood. After a while, he wanted to find out if the girl really liked the flowers that she loved often to collect. In any case, the woman did not count or understand why the man needed this information. In fact, the man wanted to make a girl a pleasant surprise, but he did not want to tell about it, and because it had to be a surprise. After a while, she suggested going to another place, but such a proposal was very surprised because he knew how dangerous it was. She began to convince her husband that everything had to be good because she had a lot of acquaintances there. After a while, he still decided to agree with her and trust the girl, and he also realized that it was a great opportunity to get close. As soon as they arrived, the man immediately suggested that the girl give her hand so that she would leave the carriage and did not damage her body parts. In the beginning, she did not feel comfortable in such a terrain, but she knew that the man was next to her, so began to calm down. Grace tried to look in different directions, and at the moment they with her husband noticed what they did not count on at all because they had a strange man in front of them. This woman began to say that she used special energy that enabled her to turn into another person with whom they only said. As soon as the girl heard her voice, she immediately realized that she often heard such strange voices in her head. They started discussing everything together, and then the girl asked that the woman did not use such strong energy, and then the beauty decided to apologize. At the moment, Grace did not think at all that artifacts and divine power could somehow intersect in such an ecosystem. Looking at the girl, the man asked if she wanted to talk to such a person alone. But after analyzing all these events, the girl decided that it was necessary to look for a reason in another city to be able to discuss it. In the end, she realized that the root of all problems was in another place. Because of this, the girl did not want to stay with these people at all. But after a while, she realized that it was possible to somehow follow the place from which this energy came, and so they could stop it. When the girl began to tell her beautiful plan, in that second the man wanted to know how she planned to realize it in fact. Then he wanted to ask a third party or a stranger's holiday to pay them a little attention because it was very important for them. In the beginning, he began to think about whether they needed to talk to such a person at all because it could really facilitate their task. Then the girl asked that the man still did not interfere with her plan because she was already under control. He began to be disappointed a little because he understood that he just wanted to realize his plan to realize the girl at all. Looking out the window, she really began to realize that she had a lot tired of all these strange events, but she couldn't do anything. Watching the stranger and her husband, she began to realize that they looked very well, and then began to dislike the girl. When everything is over, then the girl heard that her husband came to her again, and the beauty already wanted to find out if he did what she asked. With a big smile, he said that everything he asked his girl he did, but was not sure whether it was all a true solution. Looking at the girl, the man noted that if she still felt bad, she could return home at any time. A second later, the girl learned that the worker reported that a strong fire had not stopped at all at their destination. After heard, she realized that she had to come to that place as soon as possible, and her husband fully supported it. As soon as they arrived at their destination, the man immediately wanted to find out the worker, or had no people affected by the fire. But fortunately, he told everything only from the positive side because all the people were completely alive, although the building itself was severely injured. Also, the worker added that at this place he was the first to see a man who had no desire to talk at all and was unconscious. Despite this, all the young men still wanted to talk to this person and wanted to wake him somehow, but did not give anything. After one girl wanted to tell him something, a man smiled immediately and agreed because he realized that it could somehow help. She began to say that the guilt of the fire was a lot of oil, but she also noted that it could not just start burning. Subsequently, the girl began to feel very badly, so she suggested that they leave this place because the smoke that still had a very negative impact on the fire. After this story, the girl could not believe her for a long time because she realized that she had never seen such in her life. After they calmed down a little, man wanted to listen to the girl's version because she was very excited and wanted to tell something. When she began to feel that she was in a safe place, she decided to tell you immediately because it could somehow help. Subsequently, they began to overwhelm emotions again. Because of this, she began to remember her past life in which she was scared to be. As soon as the worker noticed that the girl had already opened her eyes and she woke up, she decided to help her. She did not want to take her help because she could not even get out of bed, and the girl still wanted to know what happened while she was sleeping. After listening to everything that the worker told her, the girl asked her to prepare her delicious tea, as well as for guests. The employee realized that she would now obey all orders, and the girl emphasized that she had to talk to one person personally. After worshiping, the employee clearly stressed that she would do everything because she understood that there was simply no other way out at that moment. After the long-awaited person entered her in the room, the girl immediately congratulated her and thanked her that she had come. And as soon as the beauty noticed such a person, then immediately she also glad because she also had several questions. There were still a lot of thoughts in her head that just did not meet each other, but she still decided that it was necessary to gather. As soon as the girl heard such strange rumors, she told her the interlocutor she did not immediately want to believe it. As it turned out, the girl did not lie and decided to give several arguments that really proved the truth of these words. The women who worked on her began to be aware that it was the very truth because she knew a lot about them. After the girls really realized that they did wrong with the girl, they immediately decided to apologize. She did not know how to respond to such words because workers always proved that they were right and never recognized their mistakes. With a smile on her face, the girl began to apologize again, and then their relationship was a little adjusted. After that, the smile of both girls did not go anywhere at all because they now got rid of and began to communicate normally. They still remembered their future, but now it did not play such an important role as before. After a while, the beauty again wanted to meet her husband and discuss with him all personally, because he was an important person. The man began to communicate with the girl, and immediately noted that she had to listen to any opinion, even if they were workers. She began to fully agree with her husband, and in the end wanted to find out that she could join the expedition in a contaminated area. He did not know how to answer the girl correctly because he understood that there was very dangerous there. Noticing that the man had not a very positive reaction, she began to beg it because it was very important for her. In the meantime, in another room, she began to study very strange inscriptions she found on paper. When they had to leave this beautiful place, the worker decided to hold them in person. She asked that the people who were near the girl always follow her, because the worker herself was very worried about the girl. All the participants of the expedition were very prepared. Because of this, the partner emphasized that no one was going to touch such a girl with his finger. Hearing all these words in her side, she immediately began to understand how good the worker was, in fact, and then thanked her too. But at the same time, she remembered a man who spoke to a stranger for a very long time and looked at her charmingly. She decided to thank everyone that they supported her so well in such a difficult situation, but at the moment she did not have time to gather with her thoughts as she saw something. Then the ordinary people who continued to observe, she noticed that the girl began to smile, but what they did not know with this reaction. After a few minutes, she asked when they had to go because it has already passed a lot of time. The man who stood nearby began to apologize for being so late because he confused hours. Returning their heads, the girls were very happy to see a man who had to go with them to such a strange and interesting place. As soon as she sat in a carriage that had to bring her to this place, the girl immediately fell asleep and began to think about something. When they arrived at their destination, they began to look at all immediately, but the terrain turned out to be really ugly. The man began to tell that from the very beginning he emphasized the girl where they had to come, so he wanted to react calmly to it. The employee who was in this area decided to tell at least a little strange people what happened here. He also decided to give the list of which they had to read in order to continue to stay in the area. Employees who continued to be in this area decided to discuss the appearance of strangers personally. Having examined a little better this area, the girl began to realize that it was necessary to personally analyze where he lived here. She believed that she was in such a place for the sake of her husband because she wanted to spend more time with him to get closer to him. A few minutes later, she began to realize that her ideal world was a little different because she could not control all the situations now. In a few minutes, a few workers decided to talk to her personally to understand where they came. The girl began to emphasize that her goal was different at all, but the workers still did not understand. A few minutes later, they noticed geologists who studied this area with great desire and saw a lot of strange that never noticed before. The girl, who stood near her partners, decided to help them a little, but the partners themselves did not have that desire at all. When a man wanted to talk to the woman very much in a few hours, and she in turn decided not to give up. Lowering her eyes, she emphasized that she was very worried about how the events would happen further because she did not count on such a turn of the terrain. Closing his eyes, the man began to reassure her and emphasize that soon everything had to end. As soon as she paid attention to him, she was a little worried, but he insisted that he had to just forget everything. Benny was convinced that his wife simply wanted to find out everything from the eye and decided their conversation would actually be personal. Then he continued the conversation about the work and hoped that the borders between the general and their personal would be erased. While they were walking through the dark forest, Grace tried to tie white ribbons to find the way home easily. The tapes were actually very glowing as they were from a new product, namely from the workshop of magical artifacts, and were covered with sacred paint. From the very beginning, when the man checked them, they were not so strong. It seems that such light could only appear in the dark, and if you improve them a little, they will be very useful. Then she realized that her husband felt weak to magical objects. In fact, they liked it very much, though they could not heal people as a divine power of the temple or medicine, but magical objects brought a lot of comfort to people. Suddenly they realized that they got to the place that was noted on the map. Even in the dark, it was clear that all the earth was really barren. Benny took the flashlight from his wife and then wanted her to follow him, but kept very close to him. She wanted him to pay attention a little to the side, as she decided that it was there that something started to move and glow. The Duke asked her to wait a minute and then showed her small stones that were like precious. It was fashionable to even think that these stones were magical, but it was a little different. Now the man was sure that he had a mine of magical stones, but low quality than stones of the lowest sample, so it was necessary to call an expert to evaluate them. But she immediately noticed that when the light fell on stones on the other side, its color changed as if the northern glow. In her mind at that moment, the idea that they could consider buying the mine and her husband did not mind when she spoke about it. He understood well, if they buy it, they would immediately be able to justify the support of the contaminated territory, but first wanted to deal with it and then send a proposal to the imperial court. Grace was well aware that the man decided to benefit, and all other annoying troubles to transfer to the imperial court. The Duke was definitely not as simple as it really seemed. Benny thought well, but could not think of how to use it, so he turned to his wife. Very soon, the Duchess saw a bunch of large boxes with humanitarian aid, which were directed west from the Duke. Given the severity of the current situation, they had to consider donating the gifts of the Duke Zerit. At that moment, when they turned their head back, they saw Boris Benedict. The Duchess was convinced that if this man was there, then there was an Arias nearby. In fact, he liked Grace, because he was exactly who could always rely on, was the support and protection of the Aria itself. She reported that they received gifts, and some of them would even leave in attention, but others would send it as humanitarian aid. Since the effects of pollution for the residents of the empire were too difficult, therefore the dukes just broke their heads, how they could help them. A little later, the woman noted that all the knights of the temple gathered near her and discussed something loudly. The maid could not stand and went to one of them to find out all the details. The Duchess was shocked from what she heard. The knight immediately told them that the holy, namely the Arya, was simply robbed, and now they tried to find a criminal. Grace then wanted to find out what was stolen, and maybe they needed some help. The saint disappeared the gift she received from the Duke of Zaret. Therefore, as soon as the Duke learns about it, it can regard it as just a sign of disrespect for him, which will put everyone in a difficult situation. The man was no longer tuned to the conversation, as he had an order to inspect the place where the incident occurred. The maid immediately realized that he was tuned against her mistress, and even seemed that she was suspected of a crime. The man was not going to search the whole territory, he only had to check the Duchess. But the knight of the woman who defended Grace intervened. She immediately stressed that after that he had to apologize to her mistress, and even if she did not find anything in her room. But the fear was not solemn. The necklace of which the holiday received as a gift was in the boxes that belonged to Grace. The woman did not understand how it could happen and put all the guilt on her. All around were very surprised, but the man wanted to hear some explanations from Lady Felton. But she really did not understand anything and could not even think of how it could happen. When her husband appeared, he ordered him to look into his eyes immediately and to squeeze that he was sure in her, confident and trusted, and also believed in every word. Although she was a little surprised, she decided to tell him everything she knew about. The Duchess was very smart and ordered the powder. Therefore, if she touched the necklace, then the powder could confirm it if applied to the product. She really wanted to look at the box. She assured that she would definitely do nothing wrong with her and therefore insisted on her hands. She gave her to hold her to her husband and immediately accepted her. As soon as she applied the powder, she began to drive a box. Therefore, if she stopped her, then her fingerprints will have. But if her prints do not appear there, she stressed that they would have to come up with some justification of why she had fallen suspicion. When she looked at the product, she realized that the fingerprints of knights would not be there, as they were all in finger. The Duchess immediately reported that everyone's fingerprints were unique, and one of those who was around immediately began to hide their fingers in the eyes of everyone. The woman could not believe that it could be so easy to detect, and began to come up with justification for herself. The Duchess was not confident that it was the criminal, but if the prints would coincide, then everyone would be considered as her criminal. The Duchess still managed to reveal the offender, and after that, everyone apologized to her, and after that, what happened, her case went on successfully. But his calm facial expression suggested that in the place the influence of the temple was much more. As soon as it all ended, the prince insisted that they, together with Arya, leave this place and was not against his proposal at all.